What has happened, everybody? James Hancock here. I'm back to review Francis Ford Coppola's decades in the making Megalopolis, a Fable. This is kind of a bittersweet moment for me in that this is most likely the last time we'll get a chance to discuss a new movie by Francis Ford Coppola, a director who's given me a lot of joy throughout my life. I've seen every movie he's ever made, including several that he directed under a different name early in his career, and I recently made a video where I ranked his entire filmography, which I'll link in the description below. And while I'm the first to admit he's a strong contender for the greatest director of the 1970s, my personal favorite decade of filmmaking, I'm also the first to criticize him when he makes a movie like Jack, which came along right as I was really getting obsessed with his movies. Long story short, my heart's already been broken once. It can't be broken twice. So whatever criticisms I might have for Megalopolis, I'm going to try and serve them up without getting vicious, as I'm prone to do. I run very hot and cold with movies. I either fucking love them or I fucking hate them, or sometimes I'm completely indifferent. But in that Coppola spent decades rewriting and rehearsing Megalopolis, I'm going to try and give the master the respect he deserves, even if the movie is a total mess. But let's start with something positive. I think if you made a supercut of all the scenes involving Aubrey Plaza, it would actually result in a wildly entertaining short film involving sex, political intrigue, backstabbing, assassination, you name it. And she alone seems to be having a lot of fun with this movie and outshines every other member of the cast. So if you've ever liked Aubrey Plaza in anything, go see it just to revel in her performance, which feels like this weird futuristic version of something straight out of I, Claudius. But as far as the rest of the movie goes, it feels like this wildly ambitious experiment where Coppola gave one of his precocious grandchildren $100 million to basically make the most expensive high school play ever made with a few of Coppola's celebrity friends. And like with any high school play, some of the kids have talent, but in general, those plays tend to be unwatchable, and it absolutely blows my mind that this is where Coppola landed after so many drafts. In his own words, he says he wrote millions of drafts of this movie because the movie is so goddamn pretentious, oftentimes unintentionally hilarious, bordering on amateur. But I have to acknowledge, as I was making my speedy getaway to the exit at the end of the movie, there was a portion of the audience that was erupting in thunderous applause. So it wouldn't surprise me at all if over the coming weeks this movie earns itself a really passionate base of defenders who are going to watch this movie on repeat, and they're going to laugh uproariously at every clumsy scene where actors are kind of standing around looking totally bewildered by what they're expected to say or do next. But for me, great movies are often the result of the internal tension between art and commerce. You need visionary artists like Coppola exploring new terrain, but you also need badass producers like Robert Evans, hence The Godfather, which is great entertainment and also a great work of art. But with Megalopolis, we finally have the answer to the question, what would Coppola do with total creative freedom and nearly limitless resources? Because as everyone knows, he liquidated a lot of his net worth from the wine business to make this movie. So I hope he's proud of what he achieved. I hope he loves the movie. But from my point of view, let's just say it's not as good as The Godfather, but we'll get to where I think it ranks in his overall filmography later in the video. So what's the story, you might be asking yourself? Well, here's a brief synopsis from Wikipedia. Set in an imagined modern United States, it follows visionary architect Caesar Catalina, played by Adam Driver, as he clashes with the corrupt mayor Franklin Cicero, played by Giancarlo Esposito, in determining how to rebuild the metropolis of New Rome after a devastating disaster. And in broad strokes, that actually sounds pretty good. And at times, you can kind of read between the lines and envision this brilliant epic that might have been if the movie didn't constantly trip over its own lofty ambition, with Adam Driver just pontificating endlessly about his idealistic vision for the future, or worse, Shia LaBeouf's megalomaniacal political ambitions. But that's in essence what this movie's about. What kind of future do we want to build? What kind of future do we want to strive for? But of course, there are corrupt politicians, greedy bankers, cutthroat family members, and amoral journalists mucking up the process every step of the way. And if you wanted to be charitable to the movie, you could say that there's a wonderful sense of idealism and hope at the core of the movie. But if I had to zero in on what I think the biggest problem is, there's a complete and total lack of tension or dramatic conflict. It all feels really flimsy, inconsequential, almost like we're watching actors endlessly rehearsing or improvising, and if someone happens to get stabbed in the chest or shot in the face, they'll likely stand right back up and keep acting with a capital A in the next scene. And over the years, much wiser people than myself have pointed out that whether you're writing a great book or shooting a great movie, you have to make really tough decisions about what goes in and what gets cut, and sometimes you have to be genuinely ruthless on that front, even with individual scenes that a storyteller might adore. But this is one of those movies where it feels like nothing got cut, almost like Coppola let the inmates take over the asylum, and it leads to some genuinely horrific performances by actors like Jason Schwartzman, who seems to think that he's still the charming youth of Rushmore in spite of now being a middle-aged man, or a truly forgettable performance by Dustin Hoffman, one of several old-school legends Coppola recruited for this movie alongside Jon Voight and Lawrence Fishburne. But I honestly totally forgot that Dustin Hoffman was even in the movie until I checked my notes before starting this video. So much of this movie is just absolutely dreadful, but it must be said, I couldn't take my eyes off it. This is Coppola 100% making a movie on his own terms, completely surrendering to every self-indulgent impulse that he managed to suppress back when he was enjoying his hot streak in the 1970s. And as I was watching this movie and rolling my eyes at all the frequent comparisons between the corruption and idealism of ancient Rome versus the corruption and idealism of our society today, I kept thinking about this clip from Heart of Darkness, where on the set of Apocalypse Now, Coppola was talking about his greatest horror of attempting to do something great without coming across as pretentious.
Nothing is so terrible as a pretentious movie. I mean, a movie that aspires for something really terrific and doesn't pull it off is shit, it's scum. And everyone will walk on it as such. And that's why poor filmmakers, in a way, that's their greatest horror, is to be pretentious.
And along those lines, we have to discuss the fourth wall breaking moment where an employee of the theater turns on the lights in the auditorium and interviews Adam Driver's character on the screen. And I knew well in advance that the scene was coming, and it was precisely the kind of self-conscious artistry that makes me fucking gag. But at least Coppola in his own way is still trying to experiment with technology and reinvent the form of cinema and what's allowed and what's not. And some will claim that this scene was a stroke of genius, but I found the moment to be so awkward that I was kind of like recoiling into my chair, turning beet red with an embarrassment on Coppola's behalf. But fuck it. If anyone has earned the right to embarrass himself on the big screen, it's Coppola. It's his own money. He can do as he likes. But I should acknowledge that one of the possible reasons as to why I'm being so negative on the movie is that I had just had a really good movie-going experience at the New York Film Festival. I saw a press screening of Anora, and I'll be reviewing that movie tomorrow. But I went from a press screening of Anora at the Film Society at Lincoln Center here in New York, hop in a cab, blasted 45 minutes west into New Jersey to catch this movie at an IMAX screen. Although it must be said, that IMAX screen was fucking incredible. Can't remember which theater it was in. Hang on. AMC Garden State 16. I often have bad experiences at movies here in Manhattan. AMC Garden State 16. I mean, no phones, no talking. People were there to revel in Francis Ford Coppola's latest movies. I had a great movie-going experience in terms of the presentation, but what was so bizarre about the screening was how I had just been at the New York Film Festival, and then they, before the movie started, they showed a live stream interview between Coppola, Spike Lee, and Robert De Niro back at the New York Film Festival. So I was like, oh, this is so weird. I was just at the festival, and now I'm in New Jersey watching a live feed of an interview at the festival. Somehow I just missed the fact that there was a screening of Megalopolis at the New York Film Festival. In any case, you never want to watch a movie after like a long rambling kind of just like strange Q&A. It was a bizarre Q&A where Coppola's going off on a bunch of different topics. I have no idea why Robert De Niro and Spike Lee were included, apart from just the fact that they're old friends. But like they would get sidetracked and start talking about politics and all this stuff. It was deranged, but in its own way, it was so unintentionally humorous. I actually had like a better time just watching that whole Q&A kind of fall to pieces. But like, if you're about to watch a long, ponderous, pretentious movie, you don't want to have a long, ponderous, pretentious conversation ahead of time. Do the Q&A after the movie. So by the time Megalopolis started, I was admittedly a little fatigued, and for like the first half of the movie, I still had Anora playing in the back of my brain. I really got a nice buzz from Anora, and I couldn't get it out of my brain. So it's probably unfair to judge the movie Megalopolis after having a great experience, but sometimes you got to watch double features because that's what movie lovers do. But there was one really interesting moment in the Q&A that I want to call attention to where Coppola acknowledged that he made a very willful and deliberate attempt to include a wide array of different points of view in his cast and crew, because there are people on this movie that have been quote-unquote canceled, whether that's Jon Voight for his politics or Shia LaBeouf for his personal drama. But in the movie, it makes a very strong point about how you can't build a future unless you have a debate about the future with every single voice, like on planet Earth, as like part of the equation. That's part of like kind of like the idealistic approach of the movie, is that we're going to build the future together as one great civilization, blah, blah, blah. But it also talks about how, too much civilization might end civilization. It's got some interesting kind of contradictory points of view. But I do applaud Francis Ford Coppola saying, I'm going to bring in Jon Voight and put him to good use, even if we don't see eye to eye politically, because Jon Voight, no matter what you might think about his politics, I mean, he's the star of fucking Deliverance. I mean, he's incredible. He's the star of Midnight Cowboy. He's a true legend of the late 60s, early 70s cinema. And he's actually kind of good in this. He has some good scenes with Aubrey Plaza. And as far as Shia LaBeouf goes, I never canceled him. I just don't like him as an actor, but no one can deny his intensity and his devotion to his craft. He's a very passionate actor. I just find him to be personally annoying, and he has many, many scenes in this movie which exemplify why I find him to be so annoying. But if you love Shia LaBeouf and you've been wondering why he's been missing from the screen, go see Megalopolis. He has a major role in this film, and easily the most outrageous and memorable scene of the entire movie is between Shia LaBeouf and Aubrey Plaza, where it's like, it's so wildly, like, I won't say it's erotic because it wasn't a turn on, but it's so wildly sexual. Like, where did this come from? But I'm glad they did it. I mean, it's totally deranged. But sadly, I also remember a lot of scenes where I found myself laughing at the movie's expense. Like Adam Driver, let's just say there's an assassination attempt on him at one point, which leads to some ridiculous overacting on his part. And I was just kind of guffawing, just like, what the fuck are we doing here? But there is some good stuff. Like Giancarlo Esposito is fantastic. I mean, I feel like he could roll out of bed, bump his head, be like half in a coma and still deliver a great performance. And he's fantastic here. And I hate to say it, but Natalie Emmanuel is kind of terrible in this. They place a huge chunk of the burden of this film on her shoulders, where frequently she's carrying the entire weight of the movie. And either her part was underwritten or it was just like, too big of a hill for her to climb as an actress. But sadly, she was a little disappointing. But maybe it's time to talk about where I think this film ranks relative to all of Coppola's other films. So real quick, I'm going to pull up my official ranking or my notes from my video that I did on his career back in the spring. And he's made a total of 24 films, if you include his short from New York Stories as one of those movies. And I think, I haven't done a lot of soul searching about this, but it's definitely better than Jack, which is my least favorite Coppola movie. Definitely better than Finian's Rainbow, a ridiculous musical, which has its moments, but I fucking hate that movie. Youth Without Youth is just awful. Twixt, that's also awful. I mean, these movies are just terrible. I guess let's plow to it. I had a 19 New York Stories because I think that was the weakest segment of New York Stories. Scorsese's segment, which was much better. You're a Big Boy Now. I think we're in You're a Big Boy Now territory, where there's great moments, great beats, but also the movie is kind of a mess. Dementia 13 is a very, very low-budget horror film or thriller. But it's got some really fantastic scenes that I think are just like, kind of almost like the template for the slasher genre to come in the following decades. So this is going to sound insane. Dementia 13, his true directorial debut where he was credited as the director by his full name. He'd done other stuff before that. I don't think Megalopolis is as good as Dementia 13. So I'm going to rank this movie at number 18, the new 18, in Coppola's career. Tetro, which I ranked at number 16, I just feel like it actually does work as a really great personal movie. And after that, you start getting into the good Coppola movies like The Rainmaker and things like that. But in that, I don't rank this movie quite as highly as Dementia 13, a really low-budget movie that he directed for Roger Corman. It's his way of just kind of circling back to the internal tension between art and commerce. Roger Corman was a legendary producer. He made a lot of money making low-budget horror movies over the years. And I feel like a great director, a great artist, even like the greatest directors who've ever lived, sometimes need a great producer. Like Orson Welles, who's my favorite filmmaker, did his most commercial work or his most successful work when he was working with producer John Houseman. I feel like that tension between Houseman and Welles resulted in just, some Hall of Fame theatrical productions, radio productions, early movies, etc. And when they had a parting of the ways, Orson continued to do great work, but his I guess the last few decades of his life, he really struggled because he needed somebody with like a riding crop to kind of whip him and make him behave. And as much as I would love the idea of like my favorite filmmakers doing their best work with creative freedom, there's plenty of evidence to suggest otherwise. And I guess, but the flip side would be if you have too much producer interference or too many executive notes and that sort of thing, you can completely bleed the life out of every movie. So it's like movies are a weird thing. It's, as I always say, the problem with the movies as an art form is that it's a business. The problem with movies as a business is that it's an art form. And every once in a while, you'll find that perfect sweet spot where you have a classic movie, a great story, a great work of art, and like a genuine crowd pleaser all rolled into one. And those movies would include like Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings trilogy or like Lawrence of Arabia. Like there are movies out there where like, wow, like this is the movie business at its best, putting its best foot forward. And when you're talking about Coppola, obviously The Godfather and The Godfather Part 2 and Apocalypse Now. Like, those are perfect examples of art and commerce working hand in hand, delivering some of the best movies ever made. And as I glance at my list, what I'm realizing is that the first Coppola movie that I saw in the theater, before I even knew who Coppola was by name, but the first Coppola movie I saw in the theater was Bram Stoker's Dracula in 1992, which, like Megalopolis, kind of got ripped apart by critics at the time. But, I was a 16-year-old kid. I didn't give a fuck about critics. I just wanted to see naked vampires, feeding on people. And that's exactly what I got. I love Bram Stoker's Dracula. So who knows? Maybe there's a 16-year-old kid out there right now who's like, Megalopolis fucking rules. Like, give me more Megalopolis. Who can say what time will do to the reception of Megalopolis? Plenty of movies are misunderstood upon initial release and then reevaluated later on. That could happen with Megalopolis, but right now I'm inclined to say it's a very ambitious experimental failure with some great scenes. Like I said, Aubrey Plaza's scenes are fantastic. But I guess the sad reality is my favorite Coppola experience I had in the theater upon its initial release was the first, Dracula, because I've never had as good of a Coppola experience in the theater since, even though I have seen Godfather 1 and 2 in the theater. But those were revivals. I was not alive upon their initial release. But just as a way of wrapping up this video on a positive note, if you want to get a real sense of just the epic grandeur and the triumphs and the failures of Coppola's career, I'm going to recommend everybody read The Path to Paradise, which is let me get a better angle. The Path to Paradise, one of the best movies, one of the best books about movie history ever written. I think Sam Wasson's, he's a strong contender for the best chronicler of film history right now, or at least if you're looking for a film historian that likes to tackle the late 60s through the early 80s, he's really good. He also wrote The Big Goodbye about the making of Chinatown. He's incredible. But holy crap, like if you want to get a sense for Coppola's early idealism and working in experimental theater and like what he really I guess Megalopolis is like the culmination of all the experimental theater that he wanted to do early on in his life before economic imperatives kind of drove him into commercial filmmaking. So his whole life has kind of come full circle. But if you want to, I guess, read a true epic saga about the rise and fall of zoetrope, followed by the subsequent rise and fall again of zoetrope, Path to Paradise will absolutely blow your mind. And it's also just a great yarn about the making of The Godfather, The Conversation, Godfather 2, Apocalypse Now, as well as One from the Heart. One from the Heart is much better than Megalopolis, but like Megalopolis, it's an incredibly ambitious failure where it's just an absolute mess, but it has so many good things in it. But I mean, One from the Heart truly destroyed his life and his career and his personal finances for many years. One of the reasons he made so many commercial movies after that was he was just trying to pay off all the debts that he'd incurred by making that goddamn movie. It really wasn't until the 90s with Dracula, as well as his venture into the wine biz, that he was able to kind of emerge from bankruptcy and debt and that sort of thing. But anyway, Path to Paradise, it'll blow your mind, and it's just a stunning reminder that at one time Francis Ford Coppola was a strong contender for the greatest living director in terms of artistic success, commercial success, awards, etc., and so forth. But I think that's all I've got to say for now. Definitely hunt it down in IMAX if you're curious at all. It deserves to be seen on the biggest canvas humanly possible, and I'm sure we'll continue to debate and discuss and dissect this movie for the rest of the year. But thanks for listening to my review. I greatly appreciate it. I look forward to hearing people's thoughts in the comments below. Please remember to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, all that good stuff. But more importantly, as always, onwards and upwards.